Hi, welcome back to Wild Geese. I'm your host, Anna. And today we are talking about the fear of being misunderstood. Woohoo! And what made me want to talk about this is that on the last episode, I got a comment that I agreed with 100%. It said, Anna, I love this. I love love. But just when I'm getting your train of thought, you start a disclaimer. I wish you would develop some confidence in how you think and articulate. We already know you're not perfect. Us too. We're all just humans and non-experts. Thank you for this lovely content nonetheless. So I posted this on my Instagram story and I was like, totally heard. Those disclaimers are definitely a self-protection mechanism against people on the internet that do in fact expect perfectionism from a random girl on the internet for some reason. But those people honestly are few and far between, and I can see how my little disclaimers can feel like those teachers that like lecture the entire classroom for talking when it's really only two people that are doing it. I just remember being like, okay, this is not my problem. So I was like, heard, I will chill with the disclaimers. And then so soon after responding to that comment, I got another comment from someone that was saying that I was too preachy in that episode. And then another comment saying that they were disappointed that I did not put a disclaimer on another part of the conversation. And look, none of this is surprising, right? When you reach a lot of people, everyone's going to have differing opinions. But I've actually received quite a few DMs from y'all to the effect of, how do I get over this fear of being misunderstood? I want to put myself out there online, in real life, whatever. I want to release my art into the world, but I'm not sure how I'm going to metabolize the feedback. And I want to read a little bit of a DM from a subscriber that's looking to start a podcast or a YouTube channel of their own. They said, I wanted to reach out and ask for a piece of advice. I'm going through so much change mentally and physically. Anything you think to say could help would help. How do I get over the feeling of people judging my content or just being nervous to have my voice out there? And believe it or not, even though I've been doing this for a bit now and my content is out there for people to judge, this is still a question that I grapple with every single day. There's really not a cut and dry answer, unfortunately, but I want to do my best to talk through it with you today. I'll be talking through some of my own strategies for getting through this fear of being misunderstood, but I also just want to be real with you about what it means to have your work be seen by a large audience. And the fact is, what you're putting out there will be misunderstood. That is one of the only guarantees when you put your work out there. So let's chat about what to do about it. But first, in the spirit of understanding, let's talk about Brilliant, a platform that's bringing a new level of understanding to your favorite subjects with thousands of interactive lessons in math, science, programming, and data analysis. Thank you, Brilliant, for sponsoring this video. Brilliant is a learning app that uses a perfect mix of engaging problems, competitive features, and daily encouragement that keeps you motivated and on task. Plus, all content on Brilliant is crafted by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from Stanford, MIT, Google, Microsoft, and more. Learning a little bit every day is one of the most important things that you can do for your mind. And I know we're all busy. That's why I love how Brilliant helps you get smarter in just minutes every single day. Brilliant's Thinking in Code course offers a fascinating ways to develop an intuition for computer logic as you learn to design and debug real problems. You can also get familiar with Python and start building programs on day one. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, scan the QR code on screen, or you can click the link in the episode description. You'll also get 20% off of an annual premium subscription. Anyway, so the other day, right as I started to think about this episode and started to kind of zero in on this fear, a quote from someone that I have quoted so many times recently, Muse Guided, came up on Substack. And this is from her essay, Unfiltered Courage, The Radical Act of Being Yourself. And it just so simply said, and yet, what is bravery if not the willingness to be misunderstood? Now, I'm specifically thinking about the bravery that it takes to be willing to be misunderstood in the work that you're creating, the art that you're putting out there. But this also obviously just applies to our lives and our relationships as a whole. And I don't want to flatten this conversation into just like, be yourself, because we've all been told that for our entire lives, and it's really unclear what that even means most of the time. But just as a little aside, because this is on my mind right now because I just watched it last night, I am going to talk about Love Island for a second. If you hate talking about reality TV, whatever, I will put timestamps so that you can skip this. If you are not watching Love Island or like not interested in it at all, I understand. But I wanted to talk about this for a second because it has been heavy on my mind since last night when I watched it. There's a woman named Amaya on the show right now who is pretty emotional. She wears her heart on her sleeve, and she was told by multiple men in a row that she is too emotional, she's too much. I think verbatim, one of them literally said,
cry too much and your desires are too big.
And this was heart-wrenching to watch. Number one, because it's just like, this is a fear that so many people have, especially women, when it comes to their relationships to men. This particular flavor of being misunderstood as being too emotional is something that hits home for many, many people. So many people online right now are like rallying behind her, showing her so much love, but she's in this villa where she doesn't have her phone, and the only people that she's with are these men that just attacked her, and then the women that stood there and didn't say a thing while it happened. But part of the reason why everyone online is really rallying behind her, beyond the fact that this is a fear that so many of us have had, and so many of us have genuinely not even hypothetically faced with men who have told us the same thing, is because Amaya is so herself. She's so lovely to watch because she's come on this reality TV show where everyone's presenting this like sanitized plastic, perfect version of themselves. And Amaya comes on and she's like singing in the room by herself, getting ready. She's letting herself cry when she wants to cry. She's being honest about her desires. And I just think this is an example of what usually happens when you do allow yourself to be authentic and let yourself be misunderstood by a couple of people. Because in all actuality, what she might not know right now when she is in the villa, not with her phone, is that sure, a few people who are directly next to her right now misunderstand her in devastating ways. But she's also galvanized a huge number of people online to rally behind her that see themselves in her and really actually appreciate who she is. And that's what usually happens when you're honest, but you're misunderstood, is that it's a couple people that don't get you, but so many more people are thankful to you for being honest. Okay, I am getting off of my reality TV soapbox now, back to your regularly scheduled programming. I think it's interesting, first of all, to consider what the role of fear is in the creative process, because people can kind of talk about it one of two ways. And these two messages seemed contradictory to me at first, but I don't think they actually are. One of the messages is that fear kills art, and the other message is that fear is an inevitable part of the process of making art. First, the idea that fear kills art makes sense, because if you're so worried about what everybody else thinks about it, you're either not going to put anything out there into the world at all, or you're going to put a very sanitized, eroded version of your work out into the world. Versus this other argument that fear will always be part of the process. Zach Evans has a subset called Self-Doubt is the Creative Process. And he says that's the thing about self-doubt. It's not a detour from the process. It is the process. Self-doubt creeps in at every stage. In the beginning, when the idea feels too small, in the middle, when it feels too big, and sometimes even after it's done, when you wonder if this is really how you want to be seen. You don't obsess over something meaningless. You don't lose sleep over something you don't love. Doubt is something that shows up when you're doing work that has weight. It's a shadow, and shadows only show up where there's light. So the goal is not to eradicate fear. And I think sometimes when people say blanket statements like fear kills art, it's interesting because I'm also like, fear also fuels art. And trying to like muscle away any fear that's there is probably just going to result in a bunch of shame that amplifies the fear even further. So the best route probably is changing your relationship to that fear instead of trying to eradicate it completely, to learn how to work with it instead of letting it destroy what you're making. And maybe that starts with how we're approaching what we're making, you know, like how we're thinking about what we're making and talking about what we're making. So there are three words that I want to think about for a second. There's content, art, and things. When people talk about making and optimizing content, I am thinking about a product that they're selling. When you are making content, I think that the goal is complete clarity and knowability so that you can sell something. And in the state of the internet today, a lot of that content is content about how to make content, about how to make content, about how to make content. People want formulas, people want strategies, people want understanding above all else. Versus art, I think the goal is different. That's why I would encourage you, if you're putting stuff out there online, not to talk about it like it's content unless what you are doing literally is just to make money. And I'm not knocking that. If that's what you're doing, that's great. But when we actually pick apart what goes into putting quote unquote content out into the world, you could switch that around in your brain to art so quickly if you start to see it as this process of becoming for yourself instead of this process of putting out a product for other people to immediately understand. I feel like I kind of touched on this difference in the convenience culture episode, so I'll have that linked as well. But it's making me think of this letter that Kurt Vonnegut sent to a class of high schoolers back in 2006, because this class sent a bunch of letters to a bunch of famous writers, and Kurt Vonnegut was the only one that responded. And this is what he said. He said, "I thank you for your friendly letters. You sure know how to cheer up a really old geezer in his sunset years. I don't make public appearances anymore because I now resemble nothing so much as an iguana." What I had to say to you, moreover, would not take long. Practice any art. Music, singing, dancing, acting, drawing, painting, sculpting, poetry, fiction, essays, reportage, no matter how well or badly, not to get money and fame, but to exercise becoming, to find out what's inside of you, to make your soul grow. Seriously, I mean, starting right now, do art and do it for the rest of your lives. Draw a funny or nice picture of Miss Lockwood and give it to her. Dance home after school, and sing in the shower, and on and on. Make a face in your mashed potatoes. Pretend you're Count Dracula. Here's an assignment for tonight, and I hope Miss Lockwood will flunk you if you don't do it. Write a 6-line poem about anything, but rhymed. No fair tennis without a net. Make it as good as you possibly can, but don't tell anybody what you're doing. Don't show it or recite it to anybody. Not even your girlfriend or parents or whatever or Miss Lockwood, okay? Tear it up into teeny-weeny pieces and discard them into widely separated trash receptacles. You will find that you have already been gloriously rewarded for your poem. You have experienced becoming, learned a lot more about what's inside you, and you have made your soul grow. And this idea of making art and then throw it out brings it to the final label that I said, which is just things. There's an interview with the painter Brian Rutenberg that I'll have linked, and Brian is like a very classic definition of a successful artist, right? Like he's doing it full time, he's respected in his industry, he's got a bit of a following, but he says, if your intention is to make art, then maybe you'll get a couple of good paintings. You may even get a show or two. But I think of it this way. I don't make art. I make things. Framing it like that keeps what I'm doing from becoming precious, and that's a good thing, because to be precious is to be timid, and that's bad. Creativity requires attention to detail and persistence in the face of failure. That's why it's called a discipline. Every painting fails before it succeeds. If you're afraid to go just that little bit farther and fuck the whole thing up, then you're in trouble. You're painting with one hand tied behind your back. And I kind of liked this. As a person who has struggled with what to call this podcast, I feel like obviously, so much of what I'm talking about is creativity and making art and curiosity and blah, blah, blah. And when I think about the podcast, I do see it as an art. I think anything could be seen as an art. I don't think I like to think of it as content because that takes away so much of the creative energy around it for me and makes me feel like I need to present this sterile product that just provides you with all of the answers. Versus art, I think, is more about asking questions, and that's great. But I do get this prickly feeling when it comes to actually qualifying this as art. And that could totally be an imposter syndrome thing. But I also think part of it is because that does place a level of preciousness over it, where I feel like I need to be delivering something like life-changing to you. So maybe one of the first steps to addressing this fear of being misunderstood is actually just changing the way that we're talking about what we're making in the first place, and just thinking about it as I'm making things. And just like I have not felt the need to understand every single thing that has ever been created in the world, I don't think it's necessarily a requirement that everyone understands the things that I'm putting out there either. This is why I feel like when I witness things that other people make, I have a very high threshold for confusion and misunderstanding. I actually love to be a bit confused because it makes my mind spin. It makes me go deeper into myself when I don't understand what I'm seeing. And I get a little bit frustrated with people that are uncomfortable with confusion, because I think confusion and misunderstanding can be an invitation. So Brian, the same painter that I was talking about a second ago, says, I think there's great value in misunderstanding when you read. I like the idea of thinking that the author meant one thing and being totally wrong about it. Ultimately, what you get out of a book doesn't come from what you comprehend, but from what you don't comprehend, at least not yet. Every 5 years, I go back and reread The Three-Cornered World. When I do that, I always have a new interpretation. Oh, wait. That's what he meant. I'm never the same person I was the first time I read it. Since then, I've had a child or lost a parent, or had some deep experience that fundamentally changed me. And this helps me when I come across someone that's not understanding the work that I'm putting out there. Just the thought that we're at different places in our lives, and that is totally okay. We're all on different timelines. So while it can feel incredibly personal, it is actually a pretty impersonal experience to have someone misunderstand you. And that's why I actually think that this idea of making a lot of art and throwing a lot of art out is incredibly valuable, because what happens online when you're throwing your work out there to a bunch of strangers is that you go from this pretty safe container, usually, of the people that you know reacting to your work. And suddenly, it's thrown out to a lot of people who are projecting a lot of things onto you. I don't know how aware people are of the amount of policing that they do of the people on the internet. I throw disclaimers out there because some of you are brutal, and it usually boils down to a lot of stagnant creative energy. I mean, people will write me essays, and I'm like, you should have gone and started a Substack, babe. And I don't want this episode to devolve into me like venting about hate comments, but I just want to be honest about this. So many people hope for a huge audience, but I think it's so important to take care of yourself and take care of your art for a while before you release it into the world. While I like the idea of talking about what we're making as just things so that we don't get super precious about it, I also do believe that we should keep what we're making sacred for a while that we should protect it from outside influence. I mean, the other night I was reading Slaughterhouse-Five. Great book, by the way. It's my first time reading Kurt Vonnegut, and I was digital gardening, and there was one passage that really stuck with me. And while I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, this part is so profound. I want to talk about this. I'm going to post something on Substack about this. And I just posted a quick note on my Substack about what I had just read. But suddenly I was checking my notifications every 5 minutes to see how other people were responding to my thoughts. And that's like a very concrete example of sharing your thoughts too soon in a way that actually impedes that process of becoming. If I would have kept that to myself for a while and stayed absorbed in things that I was making and the things that I was reading, I would have had greater access to myself. It was like I literally stole time from myself to go see what other people were thinking about what I was thinking. You know, this thought of what do other people think about my thoughts is a natural thought to have. But when it's amplified to the thoughts of thousands of people, it is so easy to lose your sense of self in that. And you have to be really careful to guard your sense of wonder from this worry that your thoughts are wrong. And if you put your thoughts and your creations out there too soon, you will actually rob yourself from that process of becoming. I remember when I was younger, I wanted to be on Disney Channel so bad. And I have a very vivid memory of like sitting in the backseat of my parents' car, begging them to let me go audition for Disney Channel. And they completely refused. And I threw a huge fit. And looking back on that now, I am so grateful to my parents for that, because I did not have the mental fortitude, the emotional regulation skills to deal with what child stardom would have been. And if I'm honest, I don't think any child stars do. I don't think children should have to have the emotional regulation skills that it takes to navigate the opinions of a mass audience. I think that's why we see so many child stars struggling. And that's why when I get really young women in my DMs asking me how to get started and how to put their work out there, my immediate thought is don't. I mean, do get started. Do start making things. But please give yourself room to play and be messy and childish. I just don't think it's healthy to focus on packaging and sharing what you're making until you have a really strong sense of a couple things. I think there are 4 things that you need to gain a level of confidence in before opening up your work to a wide range of feedback. Number 1 is integrity. Number 2 is neutrality. Number 3 is conviction. And number 4 is curiosity. Before you've honed those things to some degree, I mean, you don't need to be perfect. There's no person who has a perfect degree of integrity and conviction and blah, blah, blah. But before you've got some confidence in those things, I honest to God think that you should keep the things that you're making private or only share them with people that you trust to take care of you as you're sharing them. And I think conviction and integrity kind of go hand in hand, and they're 2 things that grow over time. But there's an essay called Design Literacy in the Age of Intelligent Automation by Willem van Lanker, and he says conviction often stands in opposition to market trends. To have conviction before validation may make you seem weird or delusional, but it defines great artists. The ability to appreciate what others overlook or even fight against. Maintaining this vision requires courage, especially when it seems complicated or insurmountable. As all artists and founders know, this process is a fight requiring persistence and relentless effort, particularly when others doubt or ignore your ideas. So before you fight through the fear of putting yourself out there, make sure you believe in what you're putting out there, and not that you believe that it's good, but that you believe in what you're saying, that you believe that you are being honest. What you've made is not a lie or a half-hearted truth. When I was younger, if someone disagreed with me on something, my immediate reaction to that would usually be, yeah, I'm probably an idiot. They're probably right. I did not have conviction, and I don't fault myself for that because I was young, and conviction comes with time and experience and knowledge. But I'm also really glad that I didn't start putting out these videos on YouTube when I felt that way. Building up conviction is about knowing what you believe, and building up integrity is about believing in yourself. Integrity comes from devotion and self-trust, which I feel like I've talked about so much on this podcast, but I think both things are things that come as a matter of practice and time. There's an article by Cedric Chin called Get Numb Before You Get Good, and he says, you hear a lot in art school about how painters must continue to grow and evolve, but I think those are such bullshit words. There's great poetry and power in repetition, and doing the same thing over and over and over again. No one talks about that. The best way to find your voice is to make a lot of work and then destroy it. So there's a little bit of a theme, it seems, here with making a lot of work and destroying it. Kurt Vonnegut talked about doing that. Brian Rutenberg talked about doing that. He talked about how he would get like scraps of cardboard and paint on them and then just get rid of it. But the title of this article, Get Numb Before You Get Good, I think is pointing towards the third thing that I think you need, which is neutrality. And I didn't really understand at first what the author meant by numb. I don't like to feel numb when I'm making things, but it makes more sense to me when I think about being numb as being neutral. The goal is to get to a point where you're as neutral about positive feedback as you are about negative feedback. And I'm saying that as a person who has definitely not reached that goal. I am on the roller coaster every day of like positive feedback, negative feedback, positive feedback, negative feedback. By no means have I reached neutrality, but I do think that I have a better handling on this than I did when I was younger. Having some sense of understanding that other people's reaction to your work is not a direct reflection of your worth does help in the process of metabolizing feedback through a lens of neutrality. Another thing that helps, and the last quality that I think needs to be honed before you open yourself up to a lot of feedback, is curiosity. And this points back to the importance of not qualifying what you're doing as content. If you're making art or things that are prioritizing the questions that you're asking, you're prioritizing curiosity. Friction can be a doorway to deeper understanding. And this doesn't mean that anyone that gives you feedback that's negative needs to be convinced that actually what you made is really good. But if you can approach their dissidence with questions, you can snap yourself out of that fearful reaction that immediately comes up. There's an article I really liked called The Anxiety Curiosity Switch: How to Redirect Your Mental Energy for Creativity by Anne-Laure Lecomte. And she says curiosity activates many of the same brain regions as anxiety, but with a crucial difference in framing. Instead of asking what might go wrong, curiosity asks, what might I discover? The anterior cingulate cortex, which processes uncertainty in both anxious and curious states, shifts from threat detection mode to exploration mode. The prefrontal cortex, instead of ruminating on potential failures, begins generating possibilities. And there's kind of a cool exercise that I want to share in a minute that I think is helpful in stepping from that immediate like fight or flight response that comes up when someone has negative feedback and step into curiosity instead. But first, I want to highlight how none of these qualities that I think should be prerequisites to inviting large amounts of feedback to your work, none of these qualities have anything to do with making good work. None of this is about waiting until you've made the best thing. This waiting until you're really ready can, if you're not conscious about it, very easily slip into a prison of perfectionism. And Ion Artin has an essay on Substack called Your Perfectionism Will Not Save You. She says perfectionism is wanting to be unharmable. I don't know who needs to hear this, but you are worthy of respect even if you are mediocre. Your writing will find a home no matter how you feel about the sentence structure. Your thoughts are important even if they come out ineloquent. Not every piece you create will be life-altering. Every artist, no matter how brilliant, has a skip in the discography. Albums we like less than others because they are people. Sure, your perfectionism might make you exceptional, but it will certainly always make you miserable. I think you deserve more than that. May you never sit alone in the dark with only your cruelty to keep you company. May you cloak yourself in the same kindness you so readily lavish upon others. This is also why I think people that go out of their way to give harsh feedback, whether you would qualify it as a hate comment or not, when people have the courage to put their stuff out there, unless it's literally offensive and harmful, or they have explicitly asked for your feedback, keep it to yourself. In every lifetime, I would choose to be the person that encourages someone to keep making something versus the person that shuts them down. I think some people genuinely think that they are being helpful with the feedback they're sharing, but they should probably just help themselves by using that creative energy in a more productive way. Perhaps something like gathering up the courage to get off the stands and make something themselves if they think that they have so much good advice to share. So to close things out, to keep it very cut and dry, these are a couple of things to think about if you want to get through that fear of being misunderstood. For those without a large audience, before you focus on amassing a huge audience, make a ton of work and destroy it. And even if you don't literally destroy it, maybe just make it and forget about it. Like get a journal that you're not actually going back and reading everything that you wrote. Start a completely anonymous Tumblr page to share what you're doing. Write under a pseudonym. Embrace the freedom of obscurity. Because once you open the door to a lot of people seeing what you're making, you never know who's walking in. And for those of you that are already sharing your work with strangers, practice that neutrality. I am right there with you. It is very hard to get to a point where you're seeing positive comments and negative comments and reacting to them in the same way. For some reason, those negative comments stick with you in a way that the positive comments just don't. And it's like fucked up in my brain that I can get 100 really sweet comments and one rude one, and the one rude one is the one that will start spinning around for hours. But awareness is the first step to neutrality, I guess. I think. I don't know. And then for that curiosity piece, I have a little exercise that I think is fun to play around with. There's a woman named Kasia Urbaniak. I think that's how you say her name. But I have listened to her audiobook Unbound, A Woman's Guide to Power 3 times in the last year. And my entry into her was a TikTok where she was teaching women how to switch the spotlight in uncomfortable conversations. So a very quick summary of this is that a lot of the times people will say something inappropriate and we go into freeze mode. We don't know what to say. We over-explain ourselves. Like over-explaining or like shutting down and not saying anything at all are the two most common things I would say that happen when we go into freeze. But Kasia teaches this exercise where she says, okay, I'm going to say something. And no matter what I say, no matter how inappropriate it is, no matter how much you want to answer the question or don't want to answer the question, do not answer the question. Answer me with a question back. Double points if you question my question, triple points if you question my right to ask the question. But it can be complete non sequiturs too. You can just say, where'd you get your tie? So this exercise might look like Kasia coming up to you and being like, why haven't you had kids? And whatever reaction that stems in you, however uncomfortable that makes you, you have to respond with a question. It can be, what makes you think that's appropriate for you to ask me? It can be, why haven't you had kids? It can be, why did you have kids? And this can be soft or hard. You can turn it into a confrontation or you can turn it into a way to actually deepen intimacy with someone. You know, it can be, why do you ask? Or it can be, why do you ask? It's about redirecting the attention outward. And I just think that this exercise is very helpful because I think that when you are faced with someone that is misunderstanding you, that can be a triggering experience. And we can go into fight, flight, or freeze very quickly. But I do think that we can do that little anxiety to curiosity switch by pushing the attention back out to the person that's misunderstanding you and asking them a question and leaving it at that question. So say I post an episode and someone leaves a comment completely devaluing all of the work I put into it. Not responding is often the best answer, especially if it's in a comment section. I am not always that strong though. I am not so evolved that I don't feel that necessity to explain myself when someone is misunderstanding me. But instead of immediately going into explain mode, which is something that I would love to completely outgrow because I think that it's not a very powerful position to feel like you're constantly needing to explain the things that you make to people. If they don't get it, they don't get it. So instead of going into explain mode, switching around to that curiosity and just asking them a question. So if they left paragraphs in my comment section about how what I'm making isn't that great, I could just simply ask them, why did you spend your creative energy writing this? Which puts the attention on them, maybe makes them self-reflect, maybe doesn't matter. Our instinct when we hear someone misunderstand us is to go inward immediately. But when you have conviction and integrity in what you're doing, every stranger's opinion has not earned the right to turn you inward against yourself. And I think that that's all that I have today. I don't know how concretely helpful this was, because this is still something that I, obviously, am working through for myself. But I'm hoping that me being honest with that garners some sense of understanding. Okay, that's all I've got today. I will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.